I started out as a rehabber, and when I'm around other rehabbers, that's where I feel the most comfortable. I feel like I'm a sailor and they're a sailor, and you kind of have to be a sailor to be a rehabber, and you have to know how to cuss, and you have to know how to cry and beg and scream and kick buckets, paint buckets. And I did learn a lesson when you're trying to show people how angry you are. If you kick a paint bucket, make sure it's empty. I learned that lesson, so I don't kick full paint buckets. And so, well, not anymore. So what I'm going to do is try to talk about having like two hats on simultaneously as we go through this. And one is a rehabber, because that's what I've never stopped rehabbing. In the 90s, I did fire damage houses. I had a fire damage type job or a mold job going on every day for the 90s. My crew with me, that's with me, I've got 3 crews right now. My longest crew that's been with me is 17 years. I've kept them busy every day for 17 years, which is not easy. You got to have friends and you got to have a lot of stuff going on. As we've gotten better, I got involved with Linda, who was doing coaching. Then we started getting students, and then all of a sudden we had to figure out how to get money for the students' deals and figure out how to create methods that the students could get the deals done. And I don't say this in a mean way, but a lot of times who we're dealing with, they're incompetent, or they don't have the ability to get a good outcome, and their inability to get a good outcome will eventually cost us money. So we can't let, a saying I have for that is, we just don't let other people's incompetence keep us from being successful. So we have to figure out how to bring them up and help them. Just some of the things I've got going on right now is we have a home management company. My brother and I own about 100 houses together, so we're primarily doing houses. That's kind of running itself. We have an office, but I don't spend a lot of time with it unless there's problems. I hear feedback. So also we have Alamo RIA, which is in San Antonio. We've got about 250 members. We're doing a real good job with that. We've got Houston Real Deal, which is in Houston, so we're in Houston and San Antonio. There we've got a couple thousand people in our meetup group. We have meetings every month, and in there we formed a buyers group. And in that buyers group, we've got 10 buyers who are spending serious money finding deals, and then we do deal sharing with them. So we're trying to help them put the deals together. Leveraging these other people and stuff has made my deal flow just go through the roof. So we stay real busy with our deal flow. And I think, and of course we have Take Action Mentoring. I do that with Linda. Linda's brilliant. She's a hard worker, a great partner. She's been doing coaching for 15 years. I joined in with her 2 or 3 years ago, and I've learned a lot about the coaching. When you're a rehabber, you tend to just be result-oriented. When you're a teacher, you tend to have to slow down and go at their pace, which I'm not real good at. So. One of the things I want to talk about is partnerships. I view everybody that I work with as a partner. I try really hard to figure out what the best outcome for them is, whether it's a lender, whether it's a contractor, whether it's stakeholders. We all have stakeholders. And the reason why I wanted to talk about the partner things, when I first started, I would listen to the guys. I remember this 30 years ago. People would always be complaining about how the contractors weren't getting the job done and letting them down. And what I found is that they just don't know how to do any better. It's not that they don't want to do any better, they just don't know how to do better. When we were doing the burnouts, what we would do, I became really, I'm kind of mechanically oriented. I mean, I went and got an AC license. I know how to do the plumbing. I know how to do the electrical. So it was just in my nature to be that way. And when I first started, I was doing a lot of the mechanical work. Well, when we started doing fire damage houses and we had to bring everything up to code, I would go over every Friday when we would pay them. At that phase, I wasn't working on the jobs very much unless it was something troubleshooting. But during that phase, we would have, if we had a master something there, like a carpenter, or master plumber, or cabinet builder, whatever it was, we'd have that person make a presentation to the guys working there. And if it was 2 guys or 5 guys or 7 guys, and I would have them do that during lunch. And then it usually would take a lunch and then about an hour after lunch. and that would be on payday. And the guys, even if they were just a helper or a flunky, they just ate it up. And they got better. We would go through the code. You know, I had an AC license at the time. I would explain AC. I was the guy that was selling the houses. So I would explain marketing to them. I'd explain to them like things we take for granted, like curb appeal. I would explain the curb appeal. And a lot of those guys are still working with me today. They've got my back. I've got their back. They'll do anything for me. And when you have that kind of talent working for you, it gives you a really competitive advantage in the marketplace. Of course, I don't have to explain how valuable that is with your lenders. Your lenders, if they trust you, they'll do anything you ask. We do sometimes. Next Tuesday in Texas is the first Tuesday of the month, which is foreclosure month. We buy 1 or 2 deals every pre-foreclosure every month. They come in our lap, our students drag them up or whatever. And so as Tuesday's a foreclosure day, very often on Monday or Tuesday, we're having to cough up $10,000 or $20,000. And a lot of these things, they don't have clear title. They're not complete. And until they get complete, you can't guarantee that you're going to ever make it work. So we're taking a little bit of risk bringing $10,000 or $20,000 to the table. If you don't have good financial friends, you're not going to, or if you don't set yourself up where you can bring that money to the table, you have a chance of losing a lot of equity in these deals. So our partnerships are really important. And of course, our stakeholders, you know, without my wife, without my brother, our other people that run our office and the people that we have an implementer. We hired a guy recently. He's just an implementer. His job is to just get results. Wherever we're slowing down, his job is to come in and figure out how we're doing it wrong. Without having these people's, without them having your back, it's hard to be successful, and I think we're doing pretty good. So we're going to wear 2 hats, fund, fix, and exit. As a rehabber or as a private lender. So we'll try to look at it going both ways. This is a burnout that we did a while back. And this just gives you, I want to give you an example of some things that can happen. As you can see, it's pretty serious. And then this is when we finished it. And so when we buy a property, we have to get to the end. And when a lender loans the money, they're hoping that we'll get to the end too and that we can make money and we don't have some sort of landmine that stops us. So instead of me coming up with all the ideas, I've come up with some on the next slide. But before I do that, I'd like to just reach out to y'all and find out what y'all think are some landmines that will keep us from being able to pay that private lender back, from being able to sell that house and being successful in the project. So can y'all give me some feedback on what some of those things might be?
Cloudy contractor.
Hold on a second. What?
Cloudy title.
Cloud on title. Okay. Okay. Good. And let's just talk as he says them. Let's just kind of cover them a little bit. So cloud on title. How do we cover ourselves on that?
You got to get it cleared before you proceed.
Right. And if we don't get it cleared, what does that mean? We don't proceed? It's a business decision, because sometimes we just bought a property. We didn't buy it. They deeded it to us. 3 owners deeded it to us. The title is screwed up. It's going to take us 2 years to clear up the title. I talked to the guy this morning. He's willing to start writing us a rent check for $1,000 a month. All the parties have signed the documents, but the title's screwed up. So why would we not move forward? What if I never get clear title on that? Right. I've had a rental for 25 years. I collect $650 a month on it, and I'm never going to be able to fix title. So, but clouded title, especially in a scenario where we're flipping, we don't have to have a choice. We have to have clear title. We have to really know good. So what other things can kill the deal? So any other input? Time frame? Yeah. Construction time frame, rehab time frame. Okay, so how do we control that?
I guess
scheduling. Well, what kind of things keep you from losing your timetable? Inspections. Okay, inspections. If you know the code and you have somebody on your team that knows it, if it's an inspection central type project, then we got to have that person on our team. Historically, that's been me. When we were doing those fire damage jobs, about 95 or 96, we were doing so much, I couldn't do anything else. And I took our lead guy, and I just said, we're now partners. You know, you're paid when you're on the job, I'm paid when I'm on the job. When we're finished with the job, we'll split it. That worked out great, because then I could just walk away from it. But I had to have somebody on site. And what was the other thing you said?
Delays in materials.
Material delays. So how do we overcome material delays?
Pro desk at Home Depot.
Yeah. Well, remember, Home Depot carries about 5% of what's out there, okay? They don't carry 95%, they carry 5%. So expect them not to have what you need every time you turn around. But I will say what's really wonderful about Home Depot is their accounting. To me, that's far more valuable than anything else, because the guys walk in there, they text me for approval, and it's got the PO or the property street name on it. And then a week later, a month later, I can sort all that out and figure out where I spent the money. But, so what was it again that you said, time?
Material delays.
Okay, but how else can we mitigate material delays?
Spec stuff that's available.
Huh?
Specify stuff that's available.
Yeah.
As opposed to long lead items.
Right, exactly. And another thing is, if a project takes 4 weeks, do you have to wait till the last day to know? And we're doing a rehab right now. I actually worked on this. One of our partners, he's kind of an incompetent party because he hasn't done too many rehabs. We walked through the house. We identified everything that could slow us down. And one of the things was an island vent hood. And we identified that, and he didn't act on it. Now we're done with the job. We don't have the island vent hood, and the contractors are supposed to be putting it out. They want their money because they haven't been paid their final paycheck. So that's killing us. That's a landmine. And so the key, I think, is to go in the beginning of the job. Don't even start the job until you know how you're going to do virtually everything in the job. Okay, what else? What are some other landmines?
Make sure you have the according permits.
Make sure you have the proper permits. Yeah.
Some cities.
Yeah. You know, I'm not in California, so I don't know how bad the permits can be, but I know that the permits office in Houston, Texas they're challenged, okay? I mean, I don't know, because I don't know you, I won't use the words I'd like to use. Okay, so what else can be a thing that would slow down our job or be a landmine? Funding's big. And by the way, just so you'll know what we do, we keep track. We use Google Sheets because multiple people can work on it. All the partners in the deal. We use Google Sheets, and we have two columns. One is money that we've spent, and one is money that we have to spend. And it's basically less than 14 days or more than 14 days. And if it's less than 14 days, we have to have that money now. So we might say spent $30,000. We know we're going to be spending $20,000 in the next 14 days. I need that money now. So draw request or making sure you have funding. There's a lot of ways that you can get the funding or the draw advances screwed up. So that's a real problem. What else?
Make sure that the previous owners completely moved out and that there's no hoarders in there because of new tenant rates.
There's no hoarders in. Squatters. Okay. Yeah. Make sure you have access to the property. Okay. Yeah. I didn't have that on my list. That's good.
That could take up to 3 to 2 months because of the new regs.
Right.
In California.
Yeah. But in Texas, if somebody's in there that doesn't belong, it can take 30 to 40 days to get them out. Unless they appeal it, then it's 60 to 90 days. I don't know what it is for y'all.
We're here, same thing.
Okay, what else?
Surprises in the walls and the foundation.
Hidden defects? Okay, yeah, hidden defects. And that's why if you don't rise to the level of being a seasoned / inspector / rehabber, you need to have somebody come in, because it's very rare that somebody that's done a lot of rehabs will miss something, but of course you can always miss things. What else? Anything else? Okay, I made a list, so let's see how we compare to that. And so what we have on there is the ARV. If this is things that will keep the project from getting done right or being successful in the project. If you screw up the ARV, you could be screwed from the beginning. if you don't know how to do comps, then you have to have somebody that knows how to do comps. If a house is in a subdivision, but it happens to be on a busy street, the value of that house could be 20 to 25% lower than the houses in the better part of the subdivisions. So ARV, we have to get right. The rehab estimate, we have to know how much it's going to cost. Our scope of work. Our scope of work, I think, is to me, is very important. We get lazy and we don't do a good solid scope of work, and I think I have a picture of a scope of work that we tend to use. We have to get our scope of work, and in our scope of work, we'll go through each room. We'll figure out what we have to do in that room, and we kind of talked about this. We don't leave that house until we figure out everything, or at least identify everything we haven't figured out. You know, we're working on a property right now where we don't know what to do with the vanity. And so we have to figure that out. If we leave it like it is, it's not good enough. If we change it, it's going to be expensive. So we're trying to come up with some other option. Market analysis, we have to know, what I meant by market analysis is what's the best exit strategy for that property and how much do we fix it up. In Houston, in San Antonio, we're in a seller's market because they can drive the price and value they want. When you can do that, that means you don't have to do the level of upgrades. If it's a buyer's market, then you have to do a higher level of upgrades. And because we're in a seller's market, you don't have to do that. But if let's say we're in a buyer's market and I don't make those upgrades, then my market analysis probably would be wrong, and I wouldn't have ability, I wouldn't sell that house, and my days on market would be longer. Okay? The contractor, I don't use people I don't know, or people that aren't referred. If they're not referred to me by somebody I know and trust, and that is not somebody that's used them one time, it's somebody that's used them 20 times, I won't use people. I won't let people on my job site unless we know them. If somebody shows up out of the clear blue and they're looking for work, we basically friendly run them off. Because those are the people that steal your stuff and take your stuff, and it's just not good. But contractors, you'd be surprised how often the contractors screw up your deal. And a lot of times it's our fault because we don't lay out a clear scope of work for them. I tell them to paint the room and they think I said paint the door. So if it's in writing, it's clear. If it's somebody you've used all the time that they've got your back, then you'll usually have good outcomes. If it's somebody new, they want to get in, they want to do half the work and leave, you're going to end up losing money on that deal. Sales cost, holding cost, contingency budget, we talked about that. Repair estimate, I'm going to skip process for a second. Permitting, construction delays, marketing. If you don't market a property properly and you don't use every power or every tool that you have available, you're not going to have a good outcome. Title issues, capitalization, you got to have money to finish the job. We started a job in Beaumont, which is 90 miles away, a couple weeks ago, and we're working with a partner there, and our budget is $40,000. And I walked through there and I looked at it and I thought, this is going to be hard. It's going to be hard as hell to get to $40,000. And as I'm sitting there talking to her, I can tell she thinks that's the most amount of money in the world. And she's never been like me, where you have that money in your bank account, you get to the end of the job and you're $5,000 or $2,000 short. What do? Somebody's got to write that check. So you have to fight hard every step of the way, the whole way. Don't give up anything. I'm not saying cheat anybody out of anything, but fight for every decision, fight for every dollar you spend, and stay with your marketing strategy. Okay? Workmanship, if things aren't done right, that's happened to me a few times by using people I don't know. They just don't do a good job. There's another thing in workmanship. Even the guys that have been with me 17 years, they have a job, they're waiting to get to the next one. They work, probably 99% of their work is for me. They let down, or they cut a corner, or there's something that was near the end of the day and they want to do something else. And there's a concept that as a person that's been on the end of it, where I'm marketing it and I'm trying to convince somebody to buy my product, it's not good enough. And so if you back that up 2 or 3 weeks and the guys want to get out of doing something, a lot of times us as rehabbers just want to settle. okay, just do it. It's not a big deal. It's just one thing. I don't settle. I used to settle, and then I'd eat the bullet at the end of the deal. People didn't like the color of the paint. If we get in there and paint this whole room and it's the wrong color and it's not right, I change it. I don't try to get away with it. If they made the mistake, then they have to eat some of that. I don't make them eat everything. I'm not paying retail plus for these guys anyway. But just don't settle on things that are important. And it's too easy for us to give in. We're humans. We want to make it work for them. These are our friends. They're our helpers. They've got our back. But we cannot settle when it comes down to things like workmanship and getting the product that we want. Insurance and theft, that's another one. And deal evaluation. And that kind of goes in with the market analysis. So what do y'all think? Any more things on that list that could keep the project from getting finished? Yeah. I've been. Well, in Houston, I mean, a lot of houses, people were halfway finished doing rehabs, and they got flooded a week ago. We had 20 inches in some spots of Houston. We stopped buying flood houses many years ago. One year I bought 10 flood houses. The next year, all 10 of them flooded again, and I said, I'll never do that again. So that I've learned my lesson. Okay, so under funding, some of the things that we want to do when we're doing funding, if you're dealing with private lenders, I treat private lenders as if they've got an attorney sitting on their shoulder. I want anything that they're going to run by their advisor in the future to meet the muster. And these are some of the things that we'll want to do in every deal. We want to get title insurance. Now, if it's a situation where it's a weird deal and there's title insurance is not available and I'm bringing them on as an equity partner in the deal, then maybe title insurance isn't important as long as they understand the value of title insurance. If it's a sophisticated private lender, I wouldn't worry about it. But if it's somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, then definitely have to have title insurance. Docs, notes, deeds of trust, we want attorneys preparing that. Usually we don't want the title company attorneys preparing that because they don't represent anybody. If anything, I want them to represent the private lender. I want them to have the private lender's best interest at heart. I want them to be real estate attorneys that are used to doing real estate documents, not their friend, just because they're their friend. Letter of direction, a lot of my private lenders, I've moved into IRA companies, and so we have to have the letter of direction. And I don't know if you know how that works, but if you use IRA money, you typically have to have the investor read and approve the documents, sign the letter of direction, and then that gets funding for your closing. If we're doing trust or partnership agreements, a lot of our deals are partnerships, and we use trust for that normally. Where we're at, we use a lot of trust. I'd say almost every deal we do is either a trust or an LLC. Numbers, the info needed, the repairs, how that's going to be funded, the ARV, and the purchase plan. And if this is a document I use and our group uses when we're getting funds from some, even if they say yes, I tell them basically what the numbers are, we'll still send this document to them. And it'll show like what the deal is. I have an explanation of the property, what the numbers are, and how we came up. One thing right here is Eddie, it's interesting, Eddie said this, the total interest income on this particular deal was $33,000. I think I learned from Jimmy Napier, the confused mind says no. And Eddie talked about that. He said, I could spend an hour showing you how to use a financial calculator and explain yield and do all this stuff. That you don't want to do that. A lot of times your private lenders are working with you because they know your track record. They've done maybe other things with you. We make it as simple as we can. And I try to talk in terms they understand. That's if this deal goes to the finish, then their total interest in the deal would be $33,000. This is kind of a buy and hold. I don't know for how long it is. I think it's 7 years or 8 years, and it's 7%. Okay, so this is a good document. It's good too for us because it forces us to put it on paper and define what we're doing with a private lender. If I'm a lot of our private lenders, we're loaning their money out to other people, so we're kind of in the middleman. I want stuff like this, and I want some of these other things that we talked about in our landmines. And we'll show the picture of the house. Now, I didn't add everything, but there's 4 or 5 more pictures showing an overview like a Google map and stuff like that. This is one of the things that we'll do is somebody will have to walk the property and look for things that will change outcomes. For example, in Houston, we have a lot of flooding. Not a lot of flooding, but there are areas that will flood, and there's also drainage. Drainage is a big deal. You can have a drainage issue. You can have a house that floods on a regular basis but not be in a flood zone. So those are the kinds of things we would look for. We'll walk through, look for foundation, look for aluminum wiring, look for asbestos, lead paint. We'll just look for everything we can. And we'll walk through there and just see if there's any real issues. Whether I'm the lender or whether I'm borrowing, I'm going to do that on every deal. We had one partner who, I've got a rule, is we never buy a house without walking it. We can make an offer on a house, but we never buy the house without walking. And one of our partners bought he bought a house, had major slab problems. We sat on it for 6 months, 8 months, and we finally just decided to just wholesale it back out. He took that money and went and bought another house without walking it. And it had the same exact problem. I mean, it's just like insane. Have you ever seen these houses that have like concrete around the outside of it where they're trying to stop the water? As far as I know, that works 0% of the time, and it's an indicator that your house is going to flood at some point in the future. Well, that was the way the second house was, plus a major cracked slab. Things that we want to look at is nearby problems, bad neighbors, pride of ownership, commercial, path of progress, located, where it's located in the neighborhood. That makes a big difference. So we're just trying to look to see what's going on.
What's with the antennas?
Well, that was on the list because once I was trying to sell a house and there was a 200-foot antenna behind the house in an open lot, and they wouldn't pass underwriting because they were afraid the antenna might fall on the house. That's what they told us, but I know for sure that those people lie to us when they're turning down loans. They're looking for reasons, and maybe they made that up. But you're just looking for anything that will get the underwriter, stop the deal from going through. Okay, so under the fixed category, this is a normal scope of work that we will do. When I was buying fire damage houses, I had to know how much quickly it would cost for me to fix up a house. And I found that whatever they said, if the insurance guys went out there, if they said it was $100,000 to rehab that house, we were doing it for $60,000. So I just had a number, 60 to 65%. But another lesson I learned is they use, and I think it's called Xactimate software. That is phenomenal software. I've always been too cheap to buy it, but I copied some of the good stuff that they used. And the Xactimate software basically is set up like this. So when you have a bedroom, you write the square footage right after it of the room. Now I can figure out how much carpet I need in there, how much paint I need in there, how much air conditioning I need for that room. I can have all that stuff without actually walking the property again. When we go to put it in MLS, then in MLS, you may or may not know, you have to put in the room sizes. And I guess it's called MLS out here, right? Okay, so you have to know that stuff. So you just write it down. It will normally write the height of the ceiling. I can tell you how much paint, how much sheetrock, everything with that measurement. Then we'll go through there and we'll write down what it is. We'll write down exactly what we need, 2-inch plantation in white, 70 by 34. And then we always, on our scope of works, we always want to break it down to time and material. That's the simplest thing when you're rehabbing to understand. If you can break down your job to time and material, you can control what your costs are. There's no other way to do it as far as I'm concerned. So why not just do the scope of work? Guess. You're not going to be that far off. Everybody can probably guess within 10 or 20% of the amount of time it takes to install a mini blind. So just guess. And if you're wrong, let the contractor, leave it blank and let the contractor fill that in. We had a house that had a bad roof, and we were changing some real long ceiling joists. And my normal framers were in Mexico on vacation or whatever. I had 3 bids. I had a bid for $12,000, $8,000, and $4,000. It's just amazing. And I looked at it and I thought, there's no way. You know, the material's not that expensive. If it's me and 2 guys up there doing it, it would take like 20 hours, you know, maybe 20 hours total. And we're coming up with these bids. And if you break that down, you take the material out of that $12,000 bid. Okay, now we're down to $11,000. So we're at $11,000 labor for how many man hours? And when you break it down, it didn't matter how far off I wasn't going to pay those guys $200 or $400 or $600 an hour each, right? So if you know what the labor rate for contractors in Houston is about $15 an hour for guys that know what they're doing, 15 to 20 bucks. So if I got 3 guys, I got 1 guy I'm paying 30 and the other 2 guys I'm paying 15. So that's $60, right, for 3 man hours. So that averages $20 a man hour. Then I can take that job and break it down and say, well, you know, 1 man hour, that's 20 bucks. And you can basically, because it's a spreadsheet, you can take this column, go down to the bottom, and it'll calculate within a certain range of what your labor should be for that job. Okay, so that's how you control your prices. The other thing I learned from contractors is contractors want to do a good job. Do you know how they figure out how long it takes to do a job? Worst case scenario is one thing. That's so true, right?
Materialist.
Huh?
Use the time and material.
Not contractors. No, contractors look at it and say, well, I did a job like this a couple months ago and it took me like 3 weeks. That's how they do it.
How busy am I right now?
Huh?
How busy am I right now?
Yeah. No, they just say, I think I can do this job in 2 weeks and I want to make $800 a week per guy, or I want to make $500 an hour. That's how they do it. That's every contractor I've ever dealt with, that's pretty much how they do it. They either do it that way or they do it by the module. Like a breaker box, $1,200. A condensing unit, $1,800. Guys, they want to do it. And I know I got my AC license not so I could install air conditioners, but so I could get the right prices on those units. And when I found out those units were $400 each, when I got my license, that's how much they were. Now they're like $800. But when I got my license, they're $400 each, and the guys are charging me $1,200, and it takes them 4 hours to put it in. That means they're making $200 an hour. So that boat won't float, right? I mean, $50 an hour, $60 an hour, but not $200 an hour. By breaking it down to time and material.
Do you have multiple offers out there for you?
Pardon me?
Do you have multiple offers on fixers for you?
How do you mean? You mean buying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's very competitive. That's why we don't go after that market. We go after motivated sellers. We don't. If you're saying resubmit an offer because you've had multiple offers, is that what you're talking about?
I was trying to gauge what you have 6 to 8 offers on each fixer property.
Are you talking about buying?
Yeah.
I don't know them. It's.
So you don't go after MLS or Pro?
I don't buy MLS. I don't buy like that. No, I stopped. At one time, we were turning. I hired a guy full time to go through MLS and turn in offers, and he was turning in 5 or 6 offers a day, each about 150 a month, and we would get one accepted. So I just kind of gave up on that. But I did learn some stuff because then I would go back. And I found out a lot of times people weren't raising their offers. They were keeping the final sales price wasn't necessarily a higher offer, which was kind of surprising. But it's just too competitive. It's too easy. So we don't do that. We zone in on motivated sellers. We go after motivated sellers. Okay. And the reason we go after motivated sellers, we're going to get better deals. In Houston, there's 27,000 real estate agents. The people in China are buying houses in Houston. Okay, so when it's in the public domain, I don't even try. The yield's so low, I don't even try for that. Where else? Okay, so this is kind of our scope of work. If I'm representing a private lender or I'm the lender in the deal, I want them to have a scope of work because that's a place where they're going to fail. I want them to go through that process. That lady in Beaumont, she thought it was going to be easy. I made her do this. She'd never done it. She's done like 10 or 15 rehabs. She never did it. And then she says, oh my God, I don't know if $40,000 is enough money anymore. Now she's dealing with reality. And same with her contractor. The contractor bid we had was, in this particular case, was like $17,000. when I kind of did some rough numbers, and I figured it should be around $11,000 or $12,000. So he's $5,000 or $6,000 too high. So she had to have some sort of tool to go back to that person with. I've actually given that spreadsheet with that column blank, the amount of hours, but with the scope of work done, and I said, you fill it in. And if I'm missing anything, just add it in. Because there's a lot of times we add it in, we miss things. The contractors, they'll catch things that we won't catch. The other reason it's good is, give you a real life example, is I wanted the guy to go through, and I don't know how much you know about texture, but I wanted him to go through and do a stomp texture. Stomp is the easiest thing in the world to match up of all the textures. Well, one of the easiest. And I wanted him just to do touch up. Well, I had in there like 5 hours to touch up the texture. He had like 60 hours. So that meant that we were not communicating. And you'd be amazed how big a problem communication is. I mean, I can't overstate that. You can speak different, if you speak different languages like this, if English is not his first language, it's naturally going to be hard. But even when it's his first language, any of y'all been married for any length of time, you know how hard it is to communicate. And honestly, there are a lot of times in my mind I say things and it never comes out of my mouth. I just think that I said them, right? So having that scope of work and having them be able to do their own time, then it kind of double checks your work, okay? There's a guy locally that says he's bought over 1,000 houses, and he says he doesn't sign a contractor's agreement. He's stupid or insane, okay? First of all, if you don't sign a contractor's agreement, then the person working for you is an employee. And you can't have employees, because when employees get hurt, then you're gonna have to take care of them the rest of your life. So we have to have independent contractors agreements. But there's some other critical issues on the independent contractors agreement. This penalty, that's not a little thing, it's everything. I've had it where the guys were getting close to the end of typically the conversation goes like this: it's $100 a day until you finish. Okay, that's what I'll say. And I'll say, how long do you think it's going to take to do the job? They'll say 3 weeks. And I'll say, okay, after 4 weeks, it's $100 a day. And then invariably, there'll be like 2 days left, and they'll have 5 days of work still to do. And they'll call me, and they'll say, Ray, look, the weather wasn't really good that one day. It was raining outside. And I said, well, that's why I tell you always work outside first, because if it rains, then you can go inside and work. But you worked inside, and then you got ready to finish, and it was raining that day. So, but invariably, they'll come back to you, and I'll always say, don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. But, we're putting it on the market. It's costing us X amount of dollars per month. You really need to get in there. But the important thing is, instead of me chasing them, they're chasing me. So that penalty is huge. Pardon me?
Music, is it, should we dance?
Yeah. The draw schedule, change orders have to be in writing. The guys get to the end of the job and they want you to pay more for stuff. And if we don't agree to it, then I normally don't give in. Occasionally I do. Lien waiver, we have to get lien waiver signed when they finish the job. That will keep you from being successful in your project. Market and deal analysis. Some of the things we have to think about is our market strategy, our days on market, our hotness ratio. Y'all know what that is? I used to not know what this was, and then I read about it about 3 years ago, and I do thousands of comps, because we buy a lot of properties, and the comps, to me, I live and die by the comps. Hotness ratio, if you don't know, it's a ratio between pending sales and active sales. And that basically is telling you how fast your inventory is being consumed. And when a market's hot, it's 50% or higher. When it's slow, it's 25% or lower. And so if a neighborhood is hot, and I might look at that from, I might try to see historically how it's done a year ago and how it's doing today to try to get a feel for what the trend is. But if it's hot, then we know that it's totally a seller's market. And if it's slow, it's a buyer's market. If it's slow and it's big dollars involved, I normally won't get involved. That's one of the reasons I won't buy a house if I don't think I can sell it. Or I better have another exit strategy. Of course, some of the deal analysis, we've covered some of that. And then the exits. What are some exit strategies that need funding? Can you throw some ideas? What are exit strategies that we would have in a house where we could use funding?
Seller carryback.
Okay, seller carryback. Okay,
Money,
right. Well, you mean when there's owner financing and when we're buying it, or
but you're selling it.
okay,
Well, they can only get so much, they don't have enough down payment.
right.
You're gonna put some money in the game.
Okay, and how did we get that asset?
It's our equity.
Okay, but not just equity. Usually, I don't buy things free and clear.
Right.
I mean, so usually there's some sort of debt.
Right.
Okay, so we've got to master. Now, how could we capture debt when we buy a house?
Okay, well, if you bought it, you had 100%.
Could be a subject to.
Right.
It could be an owner finance. And then we can, our exit strategies on that could be what? Let's say one of those two scenarios exists. Now what's our exit strategy? Selling it, selling the note. Oh, I didn't have that on my list. What else? Renting. What else? Okay. Well, the thing is, let's say we do a subject to, and then I'm going to turn around. I'm subject to or owner finance. For the sake of this discussion, it's the same thing. I'm using somebody else's money from the get-go, right? But let's say I had to put 25% down or 30% down. Then I turn around and I wrap it or I rent it. I could be short on money. So how do I get that money to the table? That's where a potential private lender could come in. Refinance it. Yeah, now if you're a Jack Miller fan like I am, and I think there's one other person that knows who Jack Miller is, Jack Miller was my hero. I mean, when I found out who he was, I drank the Kool-Aid, and I drank it from the first day I heard him for 20 years until he died. Jack Miller says, and I subscribe to this, when you learn how to stop using institutional financing in real estate, you'll start really making money. And I'd have to say he's right. The problem with institutional financing is we're guaranteeing the future and we're predicting the future. And we can't do either one of those things. So I'm not comfortable with institutional financing. We avoid that if we can, but sometimes that's a way out. That's an exit strategy. Okay, so I'll show you some of the things because we're out of time, but these are just some ideas that I put here. It's not like it's right or wrong, it's just some thoughts, but you could fix and flip. Typically, it's a 6 to 12 month hold period. You're gonna need 100% of the money. Interest rates, this is out of my head, so you have to come up with your own numbers. 7 to 12%. If I'm a private lender, I may wanna try to get equity in that deal. Especially if I'm only paying, if I'm only getting paid 7%. If I'm a borrower, maybe I'll pay 12% and say, screw your equity. You're not going to get no equity, right? Okay? If I'm doing a flip where it's transactional funding, it may be for a week or less. I need 100% of whatever those transactional funds are. The rate, it really doesn't matter to me if I'm the borrower. It matters to the person putting it in there. It's going to be high, the effective rate, because whatever they're normally just going to charge you points, but it's going to be a really high effective rate. Short-term funding, where I'm doing a flip, say less than 2 months, that might be like what you're talking about, where I'm doing a hotel deal, where I'm not really retailing it, I'm just buying it, and then I'm going to flip it and either sell the note or hold on to it. It could be less than 2 months. If it's short-term funding, like a quick flip, I said hotel, and this would be if we were wholesaling. I'd probably need all the money. The rate's probably high because the length of time is so short, they got to make their money up when they do it. If I'm renting 3 years or more, there's a rule that says, I kind of made this rule up, but it kind of holds true. If we pay retail for something, and it's in the 100 to 100, in Houston, the sweet spot for us on rentals is $100,000 to $150,000 range, maybe down to $80,000. Your rent that you collect is kind of like a rent ratio for the value, okay? So in that price range, if you pay retail, if your money costs 7%, that's about a break-even point. And why that's so important is that if I'm buying at 70%, and I can borrow at, I'm buying 70% LTV, and I can borrow at 7%, I got cash flow. If I buy at 100% of LTV, then if my cost of money is 7%, then it's kind of break even. You follow that? It's just kind of a rule of thumb. You have to look at each deal independently, but at the lesson, the moral of that story is at some point you're at a break-even point. What is that in your deal? If you can get the money cheaper than that, for example, if I can take over a subject to that's at 3% and the cost of my money, my break-even point 7%, that's a 4% spread. So $100,000, that's $4,000. $200,000, that's $8,000. That's my cash flow. Got it? So $4,000 divided by 12, whatever that is, $360 a month. So that kind of becomes a quick way for me to do a down and dirty test. But it's important to know how the cost of the money affects my income or cash flow. So here's some more. So purchase rent 3 years plus, owner finance, we're owner financing it from somebody and we're turning around and renting it. That's maybe a 5 to 10 year window or longer. The percent of the total, this is the amount of dollars I would need as a percent of the total dollars in the deal, or that, let's say the value of the property. The rate would be 5 to 10%. This, I may have to give up equity. I've done all kinds of tricks to get that $10,000 or $20,000. I might give somebody a percentage of the deal, right? I may let them be an owner and get a lease back from them, because then the yield I give them is also further improved because they get the tax benefit. So if they're a high income person, let them have the house, right? And then I get an option to buy the house back later. The key is if they're putting their money in at 8%, because they're now the owner, their yield is really 11 or 12%. So I raise their yield by getting them to be the owner on the property. And so that's owner finance where I rent it out. I might do an owner finance, you buy it, and then I'll do a sandwich lease where I'm renting it from you, right? And then later on, when I go to sell it, I'll exercise my option and capture the equity at that point. Subject to rent is kind of the same as an owner finance rent. That's kind of the window. And now this is subject to wrap, same deal, where you're bringing a person in for some of the money but not all the money. And it gets risky for that person because they're in a second position. And then rapid deployment, half-baked deals, they're going to a lot of times have to put up all the money, but it may be where we're taking over a subject to or something like that. So we have to have strategies for getting that. If I'm a private lender, I'm going to play in that playground. I want to be a part of those deals. I may end up having to take ownership interest in the property to make sure that the bills are paid and stuff like that, but I want people to come to me. If I'm a rehabber or a person that's just putting the deals together, I need to know people who can write checks quick. Like today is Friday. We're working on foreclosure right now. The guy's doing what they always do. They don't call us back. And then Friday afternoon, his reality will sink in. And Monday, we'll have to get a payoff balance on the mortgage. And then we'll have to either take the cash down to the attorney or we'll have to take it down to the trustee at the sale. When we need to do that, we stay up all Sunday night doing our title search. It's not the same as a title policy. And then when we go down there and write that check, it's risky. Is that me? Okay, sorry. And I think that's it. Oh no, I got more. Marketing is another thing. I tried to grab the important things of what would hurt us on our, keep us from being successful. Marketing is amazing. You'd be amazed if, like we see this with our partners, they just don't have the killer instinct. If somebody calls you, you have to answer that phone. You have to return that call. You have to work it every day. And if you're not marketing it properly, like why wouldn't, if a property is an MLS type property, in other words, worth more than $60,000 or $70,000, why wouldn't you put it in MLS? People drag their feet, they don't put it in MLS, they don't write it up. When I put it in MLS, I want every option. Okay. Well, I want every option. I want people to talk to me. So I may put it in there as owner finance, VA, FHA, cash, anything, trade. Marketing is a big reason why people fail in these deals. They don't finish the project. They don't clean it up. They don't keep the grass mowed. As it happens time and time again. So I think that's it. So how much more time do I have?
Right now, what time is it?
I don't know.
15. You're done.
Okay. Well, thank y'all guys very much.